I'm Geneviève. I'm CEO of Meet for Impact. Some of you I have met, some of you have not, so it's very nice to see you. I'm joined by my colleague, Fathma Khalid, who is based in sunny London. Who would have thought? Thank you for being here with me, Fathma. Great group. We're going to launch the presentation right away so we can get through our content. The goal for this afternoon's webinar is to present a little bit of the topic that we cover in the Impact Strategy and Measurement Masterclass. That's a GDS Academy education offering, and Meet for Impact has designed this and offers it with our trusted and close partner GDS movement. So we're going to cover a little bit of the content, and we've already introduced ourselves, and we're going to look at some of the notions that we're exploring through the masterclass, and then give you a chance to ask some questions at the end. We're going to show a couple of case studies of people that have done the training and what that's yielded. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what the masterclass actually contains right near the end. So kicking it right off, we're recording this. You will receive a link by email. You can share it with your colleagues, and those of you that have registered, because it's the middle of the night, you will get a link as well. You can use the chat box. I see lots of people have been saying hello, where they're from. You can ask questions, you can share insights. Julia is on the deck and she will be manning that part of the webinar. Raise your virtual hand to speak. If I don't see you, cut in. It's hard to present and see people at the same time. You can also clap or send emojis or anything on Zoom. So why are we here? I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. I'm assuming that if you're here, it's because you are feeling and you're seeing the shift. There has been in the last, I would say 5 years, but particularly in the last 2 years, we've seen a major paradigm shift from logistics-driven events to outcomes-focused events, and not just business events. We've seen it also with major events and sports events. So really going from what are we delivering to what are we doing, what are we changing, what are we catalyzing. Destinations positioning themselves no longer as service providers, same with PCOs and venues, really taking that on, and becoming agents of transformation. Business events being looked at, being redefined based on the impact they want to achieve, measurable outcomes they want to be communicating. The most successful DMOs are clearly at the moment leading with purpose. We're seeing a lot of DMOs aligning more strategically with their cities' development agendas, with SDGs, and engaging a lot more meaningful conversations with clients, which means that metrics are changing. We've seen in the last 5 years a lot of DMOs really leaping in front of other groups of DMOs. And there are really some best in class at the moment. We'll see 1 or 2 case studies from those DMOs that have really embraced that shift. But what we're seeing is really it's really taking ground. And while Europe started the movement, we are working in Africa and Asia and Latin America now and seeing some traction there. So let's start by asking you where you stand on the topic. So Julia's going to launch a little poll. We'll give you about 30 seconds to respond. Shouldn't be too long. So Julia, off you go.
There you are.
So you can respond directly on your screen.
And it's totally anonymous, guys, so don't be afraid to answer.
Now, we've got a couple of people writing a guidebook. We might need to ask these people to be non-anonymous and tell us all of that they know. Let's have a look at why we're embedding this. I think some of you have been in situations when you've started seeing social impact and legacy prop up in RFPs. We understand that DMOs are still acting as first movers at the moment. And it has been one of the reasons that some DMOs have said we're not going to go down this route yet because clients aren't asking for it. I think a lot of you will actually say that that's not quite correct. Clients have asked for it, are starting to ask for it. They just frame it differently. They may be asking for community engagement. They may be asking for SDG alignment. They may be asking for how you can help them develop and strengthen the innovation strategies or the growth strategies for their sector. We have seen a lot of DMOs saying we're going to go in front of this trend and we're really going to be shifting that client. As first mover, in general, as a first mover strategy, DMOs are taking the responsibility to create and educate the market. So by creating these products and services and thinking about this and putting it out there, it is educating the client base. And we are seeing that associations and events in general are moving up in their demands for it and their understanding and in the way that they can talk about this with DMOs. So this isn't just about having better events and more events. It's really about being a lot more strategic about how events are going to be transforming your destinations. And if there's PCOs in the room, we can see that the PCOs that we work with when we're doing pilot projects are really embracing that capacity to move their services at a more strategic level. When we are working with cities to develop their successful impact strategy, there are four main components, and this is probably one of the most important slides that you will see in this webinar. There's four things that you need to look at. Most destinations start by the end. They come to us and they go, oh, can we have a social impact strategy for our clients? Whereas when you get to that point, you should have actually really moved through the first three components. If you want a marketing strategy, then you're client focused. But if you want a true impact strategy that is going to transform how you work, how you engage, and how you're delivering on your clients' objectives, the first thing to do is look at how it strategically aligns with your city's social development priorities, your country's social and development priorities, the SDG agenda pursued by your countries and your cities, your own business objectives, and in general, the kind of issues and problems that you're tackling in your country. Every time we do a workshop, we find ourselves in a situation where we ask destination, have you read your city's strategic plan or your city's SDG strategy? 80% of the DMOs or the CVBs that I speak to and that we train have not read their city strategic plans or their SDG or their Agenda 2030, either at the city level or at the national level. So this is a really great place to start. So you can start aligning where events can help support priorities for social and economic development and environmental development in your cities. Organizational structure is about how you're organizing yourselves, how you're resourcing internally to be able to work on social impact, both from your community ecosystem engagement side and from your client engagement side, having processes, having structures, having a data infrastructure, having toolkits for your ecosystem, your partners, and your clients. Third, developing a strong impact ecosystem partnership within your city, going outside of the supply chain, finding partners and collaborators in the NGOs, in the business, in the innovation ecosystems at government level, in the chambers of commerce, with citizens and civil society. So creating that strong ecosystem that is not only helping you attract events, but that is helping you connect events to local gaps and needs and value creation. And then finally, once that's in place, is this the client engagement strategies, how you engage clients, how you talk to them, how you bid for it strategically, how you develop impact projects, how you manage that, and how you measure that. So we can spend 12 hours talking about this. It's the 1.5 minute version of what a successful impact strategy looks like. We go through this in the masterclass. Some of the DMOs that have developed these are telling us that it's helping at bid level. We've started seeing DMOs win bids, specifically on a value proposition of having developed impact project or being able to measure impact. They're aligning with the city strategies. They're building that strong ecosystem. A number of you and a number of DMOs and convention bureaus around the world have started ambassador type engagement strategies, but going way beyond the traditional ambassadors. So with all kinds of connectors in their cities, they're creating powerful storytelling around this. So the idea of doing these impact projects is feeding your narrative, is strengthening your brand, is really showcasing to the client that you have priorities and KPIs that speak to them. I always say we've never won business by telling a client they would fill 3,000 room nights in our city, right? So it's having those metrics of success that are meaningful to your clients. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Fathma, who's going to talk a little bit about the methodology of creating these impact projects that we teach in the masterclass.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you very much. So just to kind of continue on from what Geneviève was talking about then, if I can get the controls to work, great. So thinking about that strategic alignment piece, it's effectively about trying to get the crossover between these three key elements. So from the organization perspective, for associations that are trying to put on a specific event, they'll typically have their own mission that they're trying to achieve. And often it's about developing their field or their sector professionally. But when we're thinking about developing an impact project, it's like, how can you leverage what their organizational mission is to generate value in that destination that speaks to issues that are relevant to the local community? So if we look at the bottom right section, if we're thinking about the destination priorities, so this could be from the governmental perspective, as Geneviève was saying, have you, like looking at your kind of destination strategic priorities and making sure that the way that you're pitching impact projects are in line with those priorities and helping to kind of move the needle against some of those objectives. But then also, how does that marry up against the needs in the local community? What are some of the common issues in your destination? How could that particular association event help to address some of those issues or potentially bring some of those learnings closer to home and develop the sector locally? So really trying to get that sweet spot between these three is where real meaningful impact can happen through an event. When we're thinking about the core principles of impact planning, there are lots of things that we need to think about to make sure that things do work to generate impact in a meaningful way. A lot of events, association events, will have, that kind of mission that they are trying to achieve, which is a way of trying to generate impact, but trying to be intentional about generating impact locally for the destination in a way that benefits the community, requires a lot more strategic thinking. So building on from that strategic alignment piece, just making sure that that is there at the beginning. So having like enough time well before the event, ideally a year out, to be able to say that, you know, these are the focus areas, this is where we can tap into, and then you have enough time to speak to different organizations and kind of understand there's really a needs-based issue, which speaks to the second point about addressing local priorities and existing gaps, and just making sure that any impact initiative that we are considering is tailored to helping to fill some of those local gaps and priorities. And as we kind of mentioned, a lot of events will have some kind of like an impact goal in terms of like developing professional knowledge, developing networks. But it's about having a deliberate impact project that can generate change at the local level, and just making sure there is that kind of conscious effort and structure around the project itself. A very key part of this that is really fundamental to success for an impact initiative is having a good group of stakeholders who are mobilized around that issue. And often it's about tapping into existing ecosystems and making sure that you're finding those actors who are aligned to that sector or that topic, who will often have a lot to say on what could happen locally, and they'll have loads of ideas on how that event could contribute to change that is meaningful in that destination. And they're really, really great enablers, really great connectors, and just making sure that you have got a range of voices in the room for the people who are relevant, really can do wonders to making sure that an impact project is successful. And it can also be like make or break for a project as well, like if you have stakeholders that are not necessarily managed well. So that's something that's really, really helpful to progress. And the last thing, which is the core principle of planning your impact, is thinking about monitoring and measurement. And we need to think about this before the impact project is implemented, just to make sure that we have all the right things in place. We know like who's responsible for collecting which parts of data. We know which outcomes are the most meaningful to what we're trying to achieve. And you can pull that together to tell a story, to see the level of change that has happened through that particular initiative, but also to understand, you know, what could be improved and how could this be further developed in the future.
And Fathma, if I can jump in, sometimes some of the social impacts, more like community service projects, would respond maybe to principle 2 and principle 3. But if they're kind of community volunteering or philanthropic type of initiative, they might not respond to principle 1, which is connected to the mission of the organization. So while you can, you know, as we say, send doctors painting schools or send meeting planners cleaning beaches, it may respond to a local need, but it's not what they do and it's not why they exist. So if we want to create meaningful impact that is truly transformative, we're really needing to look at adding principle 1, 4, and 5, where you've got meaningful community engagement 2 ways, whereas community volunteering or philanthropic is just 1 way. You've got to align locally, so you're basically localizing the global mission of the association. If they're doctors, they should be working on health. If they're engineers, they should be working maybe on infrastructure or tech education. And finally, the measurement piece is important. So if you're a city that's already doing maybe 2 and 3 through kind of community impact initiatives, you can grow those and move on to add the other principles.
Absolutely. And I think from what we've seen as well, it's really about trying to maximize impact and being able to like leverage those assets that are being brought to your destination for the benefit of the destination. And it can be a lot more meaningful than, yeah, sending a bunch of people to clean a beach or something like that. Can have much longer lasting impacts. So thinking about how do we plan for that? We have a solution. So this is the Meet for Impact Impact Maker methodology, and we have 4 steps that we walk through with events to be able to plan and deliver impact initiatives around events. So the first step is the define stage, and it's effectively that kind of strategic underpinning of your project. So you're defining what your key impact intentions are. We'll walk you through like what a theory of change would look like to define your outcome pathways for your particular project. And then it's thinking about who those stakeholders could be in that sector, in that destination that could be relevant, and just making sure that that strategic alignment piece is there. The second step is the manage step, and that's about mobilizing stakeholders, so reaching out to people, making sure you've got a project team in place and that people have a good understanding of their different responsibilities, thinking about risk management and engaging the community to support implementation, and the actual realization of the project would happen in this step. The third step is measure. So you'd start thinking about how to measure before the project actually happens. And there you'd start thinking about what the indicators should be, like from your key outcomes, like the changes that you would like to see through the project. Thinking about which metrics could you tap into from frameworks that exist, such as our own catalog. And then this includes data collection and analysis, which you can then pull into an impact report for that maximization step, which is the final step. And that can really help with storytelling, communicating to your stakeholders internally and externally, and really demonstrating like how that initiative has helped to achieve against strategic objectives, business objectives, speaking to the association's own priorities as well as your destinations, and just sharing best practices, and also learning from that as well for how to kind of apply that to future events. So in a nutshell, these are the key steps.
And we go through this, the masterclass. We literally help you work through case studies of your own to learn the methodology. Brilliant. Okay. Does your organization have a social impact plan for events? Time for you to provide us with some key inputs. We've got 4 people that say that have it and 9 people that are working on it. That's brilliant. That's more than half of the group. Okay, I think it looks like it stopped, so let's stop sharing. I'd just like to see in the Q&A, be ready to raise your hand if you have a strategy. We might ask you to talk to us a little bit about it. So Fathma, measuring?
So if we're thinking about the measurement step in particular, this is really helpful for communications and just making sure that you're able to understand how the work that you've done for that impact project has actually generated change in your destination, in the sector that's relevant to that association. But there are 2 kind of key reasons why you would measure social impact. And a nice way of putting it is to prove and improve your impact. So the prove part is the communication part. So making sure that you can effectively showcase how that impact has been generated to internal stakeholders in government, to your clients, or to anyone else who may be relevant to your organization in a way that makes sense to them and is relevant to their priorities. And the second reason is to improve. So to maximize your impact, to learn from the work that you've done, and have that to enable you to do iterative improvement to how you make decisions as things change over time in the destination. So the measurement strategy effectively works well for both of these things to make sure that you've got the data to be able to communicate, but also enough detail to learn from how the project has gone. There are lots of different things that we can look at when it comes to measurement, and often it is a little bit of a confusing question because it is going beyond the kind of traditional economic KPIs and the metrics of success that we often use historically for looking at the success of an event. Because we're looking much more at kind of social impact here, it is a little bit different, and it goes a bit beyond the event itself, and it's more looking at how have the interventions that we've made through the event that resulted in kind of longer term changes that last beyond the event. So there are a few different things that we can think about when we're looking at the kinds of things to measure. So if we're thinking about value creation for different stakeholders, that could be through knowledge gains, it could be through generation of funds, it could be through access and opportunity. So it kind of depends on who that stakeholder is, how you're engaging with them and what value means for them. So that's one particular way that we could look at measurement. Something that's quite important and sometimes hard to pin down is the influence on systems. So that effectively means like structural change. So it could be something linked to like policy change at the government level or at the organization level, like for a sector body representative or for a business, trying to have some kind of an influence typically on policy or on structures. That's what system influence would look like. Collective progress on shared goals is how we can effectively leverage that event or that impact project to contribute to existing solutions, and maximizing impact that's kind of already being generated. So just being able to, yeah, have that connectivity, and be able to create those like shared outcomes that can help to speak to local priorities, which links to the point on synergies for change and being able to have those networks, potentially generating some discussion forums and seeing how those avenues can lead to collaboration for impact. And then thinking about how some of these changes can have longer lasting effects for communities. So if there are knowledge gains locally, how can that help to improve service delivery, for example, or to create changes in how infrastructure in the city looks? Or how do infrastructural changes made during an event have longer term benefits for the community in terms of something like accessibility? I just try to think about how how those changes affect lives in the medium to longer term and the impact that can be generated through that.
And if I can say, one of the things we are used to measuring is what happened and how much of it happened, right? That's how traditional KPIs and quantitative measurement will bring us to. Social impact measurement is a different thing. We're asking different questions. We're literally asking, how did this event move the dial on something? So we're not just asking numbers, how much, what happened, how much. We're asking, how did that change happen and why? And that's why a social impact measurement strategy is harder to nail, because it is asking bigger questions.
Absolutely. And it is going beyond the things that are perhaps quite straightforward, because we're looking beyond the intervention itself and thinking about how has that activity then contributed to transformation in the broader term. So it is trickier, but it's a lot more meaningful than just tracking the kind of activity changes.
So while not Fathma, while not going through each of these, can you give us a few key examples of what we could be measuring?
Absolutely. So thinking about what key elements of measurement could be. So like one key thing is about connection and networks, which is what events are really about. So if we think about social capital, it's really about that, having that forum for connection, but then seeing how that has resulted in impact in a meaningful way. So trying to leverage that forum. Like, is there a specific gap that you could fill through having a network on a particular issue and attracting those actors, around the event to try to develop a solution to a particular problem? It sounds very conceptual, but like there's loads of kind of ways that could be applied in terms of trying to develop networks to promote solutions for a particular issue. Or another example could be like in terms of knowledge gains. If you have those opportunities for networking, could there be peer-to-peer exchange? How can that help to develop a local sector? How can that help to improve the standards in local businesses? And then beyond that kind of knowledge exchange, there could be a way to have that those opportunities for networking and connection to lead to new potential research projects and innovation in a particular subject. Could there be new ideas or new partnerships that could be leveraged from that could help that sector in the destination? So yeah, there are quite a few different ways that we could look at how these outcomes could be generated tangibly. And it does kind of depend on which topic you're looking at, but a lot of the metrics and the indicators can be fairly standard across different topics.
And how do we measure?
It's a great question. So in terms of actually getting data in, there are lots of different ways that we can do that, a lot of which you'll be familiar with already to some extent. So documentary data is looking at kind of secondary data from sources that already exist and just kind of analyzing them against your criteria. We can have surveys, interviews, which are quite traditional. Something that's really good to leverage is if you have an app for an event, then trying to get some kind of engagement through that. So it could be live polls, it could be surveys, but having the event attendees to respond through something like that would be great. Counts, so just seeing like how many people have showed up to a particular like networking opportunity or a satellite event or something like that. You can have on the spot testimonials, which is like asking people at the event or at the impact activity, how they found that experience. And with surveys, that's something that's quite helpful as well. Like if you have people on site to do live surveys, that's a really good way of getting good levels of engagement. And you can also have like media analysis. So like after the intervention, how much media coverage was there? Was there any coverage beforehand? And like what kind of sentiments are being shared in those articles? Is there kind of a knowledge sharing element there? So you can have like a qualitative analysis of those pieces of data to see how that's helping to contribute to your overall objectives. But it can be a little bit messy and a little bit complicated, but there are some ways that we can manage the data collection process to make it smoother and more manageable on an event basis.
Awesome. Thank you, Fathma. Now, let's talk about some challenges around data and impact measurement. Impact measurement is an interesting thing. It's usually when we get approached by destinations, they're like, we want to measure our impact. I've never actually been approached by a destination first by, oh, we'd like to learn how to define and manage our impact, whereas that's what you should be doing first. It's really difficult to measure something that you have not planned and that you are not managing and maximizing. So impact measurement is not the start of the journey. Impact measurement should be a function of a broader impact planning strategy and measurement and management strategy. But when we do get to the impact measurement part, and sometimes when we do start with impact measurement, we'll propose to do a backcasting. So basically look at an event that has occurred and try to reconstruct why that event occurred and what was the intention and how we possibly have gotten some results. And we always 100% of the time realize that intentionality and planning is the key. But when you do have that and you start wanting to track data, you will find yourself in a situation where we've found ourselves in the last 6 years as we've been measuring more and more events with some of our clients. The data is all over the place. It's scattered, it's PDFs, it's audio files, it's survey results, it's Excel sheets, it's all kinds of things. It's articles on the web. It takes time. It takes a fairly strong data infrastructure. If there's any data analysts in the room, you'll understand what we're talking about. So it takes resources. It takes team capacity to do extensive impact measurement. You need to have clarity on what data you'll be collecting, who has that data, where does it come from, where does it go, how will we analyze it? Because once the data's in, you need to have an understanding of how you're going to process it. You need to have themes and you need to have research questions. So you do need to have a little bit of understanding of what you're doing. And then finally, one of the hardest thing to do is to link the outcomes to the activities. And this is where the full planning and the management comes into play, because even if you're not even if you've got data, if you're not planning and managing the activities around that data, it's very difficult to answer to the question, what created this result? Why did this result happen? And how did this activity generate this result? So we've looked at these challenges in the past, and one of the things that has come obvious for us is we needed a tool. We needed a platform. We needed a process. We needed something that would make impact measurement much simpler. So this is brand new. It hasn't been launched yet. So you guys are one of the first ones to hear about it. We're currently building an AI-powered platform for planning, measuring, analyzing, and communicating the impacts of our events. It's a collaboration between Meet for Impact and GevMe. It basically aims to do everything that we are doing manually at the moment, including preloading frameworks for ourselves or some of our partners or some other people that have their own frameworks. It's meant to work across different types of events. So we're also preloading the OECD framework, for example, or the Association of Summer Olympic International Federations framework. So we will be able to use it for sports events, cultural events, major events, exhibitions, and conferences. And basically what we're looking at is using the tools that we're teaching in the masterclass and using the frameworks that we've been using, such as the theory of change, which is the most used social impact framework in the world by all kinds of organizations, to be able to build those measurement strategies where you can link an activity to an outcome, to indicators, collect the data straight into the platform, have the platform analyze the data with a combination of AI-powered and human-powered processes, and be able to generate some reports. So more to come on that. The next people that will come on to the impact measurement masterclass will probably hear a bit more about this. And if you're curious about it, come and see me at IMEX or send me a message and we can chat. So let's look at a couple of case studies that have used our from the Impact Masterclass. Fathma, we're going to have to do this much quicker than we expected because we love our topic and we keep going off topic. First case study, Gothenburg. Gothenburg was part of a cohort of Swedish network of convention bureaus that took the masterclass in 2022. And they went on to create their strategy and their program. And in 24, they were one of the 3 finalists from the Meet for Impact and GDS Movement Impact Award that were awarded last year in Bruges. The program from Gothenburg is fully online, so you can go and check it out. There's lots of resources online in English. Their framework basically is consisting of 3 components: a program, a toolbox, and a community support. The impact strategy they've put together is a systematic process that goes across the organization to work within the organization and with their clients to identify needs and connect to local needs, set goals, plan activities, and measuring outcomes and impact. They have built this hand in hand with the city government and the people responsible for the SDG strategy in Gothenburg from the beginning. They have very close collaboration and support from their government and their city stakeholders. It's an all DMO contribution, so it's not just the MICE team. They've also engaged the major events team, but the sustainability team is involved, the business intelligence team is involved, the marketing and communications team is involved. So it's not just 2 people in the business events team, it's across the whole DMO where they've really pulled in, and they've got this little task force that works on this from the different units in the department. So online, they've got this toolbox, they've got the method, which is basically how they work internally with their stakeholders and with their clients. There's a number of tools that they've created, and the community support is it's kind of like a shopping list of things that you can do, and they're building partnerships, and every month they're building new partnerships in the community. So that they have partners in the city that can really connect to what the clients wants to do, and make sure that then what that does, it helps them leverage existing initiatives in the city and make sure that they're amplifying that. So another case study, this time from an event perspective, but it was supported by Visit Flanders, who have worked with us to develop their methodology and went through the masterclass as part of that process. Fathma, I'll let you speak to this one.
Perfect. So just to kind of whiz through, so EACD was the European Academy of Childhood Onset Disability, and they developed this impact project called EACD Plus. So you can see here, we kind of brought back the strategic alignment slide. So thinking about the mission of EACD, about promoting research and education for the benefit of people with childhood onset disabilities, aligning that with the local gaps and needs. So that would be like physical accessibility and digital accessibility needs locally, making sure that there's a better interaction between researchers and end users, and having more of kind of like a participatory approach of actual users of some of these technologies in research, and furthering the impact of that technology, and then aligning that with the destination's priorities of improving research and advocacy for people with childhood onset disabilities. So this led to the overall goal of the impact project of improving the quality of life of people with a childhood onset disability. This is, of course, extremely broad. So we then narrowed in on what that really meant, and that led to a few specific impact initiatives. So there was like a technology and innovation kind of forum for people to discuss and learn. There was an opening concert which had 350 children with childhood onset disability performing. There was an experience room for people to try out and test different types of technology for physical accessibility, as well as other types of technology that could help them just see what's out there and kind of improve their quality of life in that way. And there was a sports festival as well, which had 90 children participating in different kinds of sports, with over 70% of them saying that they plan to continue pursuing those sports in their lives. Of the abstracts that were presented at the Congress as well, half of those included people with lived experience of childhood onset disability. So that speaks to that point of trying to bring in kind of more practical and real life examples into research. And of the experience room, 74% of the people who attended plan to use something that they had taken part in there and kind of apply that to their lives. Just go back. Just super quickly, this is how we kind of approached measurement. So there was a few field trips that happened through the impact project, and they did surveys for that. They did some stakeholder interviews to get a sense of kind of learnings and satisfaction, as well as a few focus groups to really learn about like the collaboration, the networking, and how learnings were then implemented. And that, as well as a survey that was done 6 months after the event to gain an understanding of the kind of the then what aspect. So like beyond the event itself, how you leverage the learnings and the connections that you've made, and how is this helping to further your research. This then culminated in the production of this impact report, which hopefully will be published soon, I believe. And you can see some of the key outcomes are presented here in terms of like the number of people who are engaged, how many people are hoping to kind of take those experiences forward in terms of pursuing sports or using some of those technological products and services, and like the establishment of a permanent music program for children with disabilities. And it kind of goes into further detail of how that happened, and the alignment with the local destination. There are some key comms pieces that really help to leverage these learnings. They had their own website for EACD Plus that was separate to the event website. There was lots of press coverage nationally and internationally. And ideally, like in the end, the EACD Plus won the Incredible Impact Award in 2024, which was an incredible achievement considering this is the first time they'd done something like this. And the DMO was really key to this. So Flanders played a big part in kind of the framing, the structure, and just making sure that that strategic alignment was really there. So they had their own framework in place, and they co-designed the strategy for the event using the theory of change, as we've spoken about. They convened an impact task force and a ninja team to really lead on that project and make sure that it was moving in the right direction. and the DMO led on the measurement side of things and the stakeholder engagement piece as well. And they kind of showed how this impact initiative was helping to achieve their local priorities through this framework, which is great from the destination perspective. And they've been able to leverage this EACD into their future events. So for the Congress they have this year, and they're developing that further for the 2026 Congress in Galway as well. So building on the learnings, expanding out some of the activities that they did, thinking about how they can make that broader, like beyond the host city, perhaps across the host country, and just thinking about how to kind of deepen those learnings for the benefit of children with people with childhood onset disability more broadly, and beyond research as well. So very quick whistle stop tour that.
Yeah, brilliantly done. One of the things we get to work with Galway because we're working with Fáilte Ireland. So this is exciting for us because it's one of the first cases where we get to work on the same event for two times. Oh, I think Julia's decided we weren't doing the poll. Okay, then. Impact Strategy and Measurement Masterclass. So it's a 2-day masterclass. And the purpose of this afternoon's presentation was to entice you to consider this if you're on the journey with your team and you're thinking about training your team. I think we've got a slide here that shows the different modules. So it's basically 4 half-day modules. It could be delivered online, on-site, or hybrid. Honestly, we don't recommend the full online. And our results clearly show that face-to-face works best. For convenience purpose, we could do a couple of modules online, a couple of modules face-to-face. So this is the kind of thing we can discuss with you if you're interested in going further. So we look at exploring impact, the basic concepts. We look at what that means when you're developing it for your destination. And then we look at client-facing impact projects. So defining, your client's objectives with them, engaging stakeholders, collaborating on activities, measuring and communicating that impact. So it's a 10-hour cursus or 12-hour cursus, I can't remember, or 12 hours with some offline work. And you get a recording, and then you get some material based on that. So I think we are now at the Q&A. These are some of the quotes that we've got from our attendees. So I think a figure that I'm very proud, 92% of the attendees felt confident in the end and felt confident to start working on their strategy. And 100% of the attendees felt more confident communicating with clients. We did one with Amsterdam in the fall. And by January, Amsterdam was refining their own impact strategy. So it really kickstarted them and enabled them to deliver their own strategy internally. We also did we did it with a group of DMOs. So Switzerland Convention Bureau convened 5 cities, and then we trained them together. I think there's someone from Basel this morning. You may not have attended, but I know at least one of your colleagues did. So that's it. We've got tons for questions. Maybe I stop sharing. Any hands raised? Julia, if I can ask you to just monitor that.
I will. I'm not sure if Manuela is wanted to raise.
She's clapping.
Yeah. We'll take that.
Sorry, it was a lot to deliver, but I think hopefully you got a little bit of a look into how and why. Questions? Phil.
Good morning or afternoon, depending where you are. I just want to ask quickly clarification. So the story you told with regards to the last case study was that initiated entirely by the conference board, or was it actually a hybrid between the destination kickstarting it and then it was taken on and carried forward to Germany and Ireland afterwards?
So option B, Visit Flanders has been working for the last 3 years in developing their impact strategy. So obviously they're engaging clients differently as a result of that. So it's through an initial conversation with the client that they realized that the client was interested themselves. They already had the interest to make sure that they were applying this to their own community. The man who was leading this, Elegas Montbalieu, was very involved in the community. He had a very clear idea of wanting to catalyze change with the conference. Didn't know how to go about it, didn't know how to bring people along. So that's how Visit Flanders stepped in. But once the event and the EACD Plus project came to a conclusion, they've decided to make this a permanent program in Belgium now. So EACD Plus outlives the event. The event itself is moving on to other cities, and the EACD Plus will be replicated in other cities, but it has left a lasting legacy in Belgium because there's going to be an initiative now, permanent initiative taken over by a national charity that will make sure that these outcomes are being looked after on a longer period.
No, that's great. It's a legacy for the legacy, so that's good to hear. Thank you so much.
It's really nice because you see there's two legacies. There's a legacy for the local community and there's a legacy for the organization because now they've embedded this in their conference planning processes for the future. So it's amazing to see.
I guess that's it from us. What do
Thank you very
think?
much for showing up today, guys.